Hey everybody, welcome to G4G on YouTube. I am your host, Napalm Dawn. The intro, which is new in recent weeks, is by Ori Calcon, and today we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the new characters that have been appearing in Marvel Strike Force, and we are going to compare them to their past incarnations. This video is not going to have too many parallels because some of the ones that we're getting in Marvel Strike Force now really haven't existed in too many other games. However, two of the characters in Marvel Strike Force were combined into one character way back in the Marvel Avengers Alliance days, and that is definitely a character that we want to focus on and talk about, and that is Cloak and Dagger. By the way, nothing annoys me more on the world of the internet than when people go to spell cloak, C-L-O-A-C-K. Cloak. I hate that spelling. It drives me up a fucking wall. And when I see cloak being talked about now, and people tend to make that mistake, I literally just want to douse my eyes with bleach. I want the backs of my eye sockets to just go swimming like goldfish in a pile of bleach when I see cloak or closic. Drives me up a wall. Anyway, so for the most part, this video is going to be Cloak, Dagger, and Shang-Chi, and we also have Deadpool. But here's the thing, we can't really discuss Deadpool because she is in no other game. However, if you happen to go through her campaign here in Marvel Strike Force, Deadpool is quite funny, and her banter, especially with her quote-unquote dad, Deadpool, is really, really funny. It is absolutely worth it to go through the campaign. One of the best campaigns I think I've gone through in this game, just for the actual plot and character interactions on their own. So, first thing that we're going to do is talk about Cloak and Dagger. So, Cloak and Dagger was released in March of 2016 in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Little did we know this was really, it was starting to get towards the end a little bit. We didn't know that at the time, and I don't honestly think Playdom did. But this kind of goes to show you, if Cloak and Dagger were March, look at how much they actually produced until the end of the game. So you had Cloak and Dagger, but then you had Classic Shocker, Deathlocket, J-Thor or Jane Foster, Boom Marvel, Beetle, you had Mantis, you had Moondragon, Songbird, Adult Nova, Knight America, Faiza Hussein, Ronin, Phyla, Adam Warlock, and White Tiger. Faiza and Ronin were kind of the cutoff of where PvP was still happening, and everything after Ronin did not actually make it into PvP, which is why it was believed that Phyla, Adam Warlock, and White Tiger were so overpowered. Ironically enough, Adam Warlock is considered complete trash in Marvel Future Fight, and, you know, White Tiger is decent on a Shadowlands team, but does not really gain a bunch of her own press, where Phyla is considered pretty good in Strike Force. Mantis is trash in Future Fight, but has definitely a good spot in Marvel Strike Force, and Shocker, of course, goes with a good Sinister Six team. But we're going to talk about Cloak and Dagger. So in this game, Cloak and Dagger are one unit of Tandy Bowen and Tyrone Johnson, unlike the actual show, which I liked a lot. You know, if I can divert course for a moment, I really did like the Cloak and Dagger show. I also liked Legion. I liked the Runaways very much. And Gifted. There was a lot of good Marvel TV or Marvel series for a while there, and it's a shame so many of them ended so quickly. Cloak and Dagger was a lot of fun for 2 seasons. The Runaways, I wish we could have gotten more out of them, and I'm still got to catch up with the season there. Legion, of course, was an amazing head trip. And Gifted, I wish we could have seen a bit more on that one, but sadly they were killed before their time. Cloak and Dagger was reviewed before I started watching it as good, but maybe a little bit too teeny bopper. Surprisingly, since the show has died, I've known a lot of adults that actually really liked the series and did not seem to say, this is for teens and 20-somethings, so at least I don't feel weird or guilty about having liked that show so much. So, Cloak and Dagger was an absolute PvP force when they were first dropped. Now, they're considered an infiltrator because of the fact that they are a double class, and infiltrator is the first one that is listed for them. But I like to call them a scrappeltator, which is a part scrapper, part infiltrator, and you can see that here on the wiki page. They started with high base health, high stamina, high attack, which is a little odd for an infiltrator, but does go kind of fits for scrappers. Defense and evasion are utter trash. I mean, this is real garbage, but accuracy is very high. So that means their attack and their crit were good, but they should have been absolute paper to kill. And under the right circumstances, they certainly were. And that circumstance was generally Spitfire. Later in the game, they had a moment where the phasing ISO dropped, and Cloak and Dagger were often phased at the beginning of combat, making them very tough to deal with. However, there was a ISO you could equip the Spitfire that would allow her to hit phased characters by turning her magic, basically, and that is where you could truly shut down Cloak and Dagger often before they were able to go. They had a passive of Blinding Light, which means they were immune to blinded and dark effects. Chance to preemptively counter melee attacks applying blinded, off balance, and winded. Dark effects were a little harder to talk about. They were kind of things like Despair. Despair is one of the biggest ones. Because they were unable to heal, and they had a very, very large heal. You had Light and Darkness, which is the fact that they count as a scrappeltator. And their ISO class was, I think, only Infiltrator is what they could count as, if I remember correctly, which is why they're listed as that first. And then Dark Teleportation, which is a high chance to avoid range attacks. I really don't remember how often Blinding Light and Dark Teleportation actually went off. I think Dark Teleportation did go off relatively frequently. Their level 1 was Bright Blades, which came from Dagger. It was an Ethereal Strike, it was a Psychic Energy attack, it did Diminish Resolve, and it purged. It removes class bonuses, and they cannot gain class benefits. And it does a pop when it's removed by a status removal effect. So, if Purge was on a character and then you use the scroll of Angelob, or the Baloney scroll, they would take a decent amount of damage. Anti-Venom was one of the bigger people who used something similar to Purged. Also, they gained Rising Up. Coming off of Cloak, you had Blackout, which removes buffs from enemies. It causes Dementia, which was either Confusion, Disoriented, Mind Control, or Possessed. They had an equal shot. And Dark Forces, chance to cause a harmful dark effect, such as Apprehension, Bane, Dark Void, Doom, Falter, Sin, and Shadowgraft. They were all relatively on par with each other, except Bane, Sin, and Shadowgraft had a slightly higher chance. Everybody gets Dark Force Dimension, which is draining health over time, but Cloak and Dagger regain health over time while affected. So it was a little bit of a selfish ability. Even their own teammates are going to suffer from it, but they themselves would gain health. Going back to Dagger, We have the level 6, which is Shot in the Dark. All enemies get a Determination attack, Ethereal Strike, Finest Hour, Measured Attack, Psychic Energy attack, and it was stealthy. This was the big one. This is the big AoE that did a lot of damage. It had a 92% chance base to hit and a kind of a low chance to crit. You had Pitch Black coming off of Cloak, which is all enemies, and it did all-out attack, which is the lower this character's stamina, the more damage it does. So if you waited later in the battle, it did more. Desperation attack, the lower their hit points were. So if you get it right around like the maybe 7 or 8% sweet spot, or about 5, you were doing a ton of damage. Ethereal Strike, it exploits Delirium, which went out over here under Blackout. It ignored defense, and it was stealthy. The second and final action, or final multi-action, came off of, again, both Cloak and Dagger. It was the level 9. All allies get removed debuffs. They get Detox, which prevented damage over time. And they had a quick action of Child of Darkness, which is full of life, fully restores health and stamina, and it removes debuffs. So you didn't want to go and use any of your 9s before your 6. It was better to use your 6 and then recover off of the 9. They were an extremely strong PvP character. If you look down in the comments over here, to this day, you can still see an absolute shit ton of bitching about this character. With the rebirth of Redux coming around, there are people who occasionally will be like, well, will you nerf characters like the Worthy and Cloak and Dagger? I fully stand against that not happening, because you had to find ways of dealing with things throughout Redux's, or throughout Marvel Avengers Alliance's PvP history. And Invisible Woman with air pressure and Molly was one of those things for a while. The Mystic was a thing, the Cube was a thing. There was always something that was the current big bad, and then there was always something that could fix it, whether it was manufactured by Playdom as a direct result of it, or ingenuity. Cloak and Dagger's ingenuity was just really bring a scrapper again, especially bring a scrapper who can hit phased characters. So here in Marvel Strike Force, let's actually take a look at what they're like. So they're two separate characters, and by the way, it's hard to find Cloak and Dagger in other Marvel games, although I think they were in Battlelines, if I remember correctly, that short-lived kind of Connect 4 game that was actually really good. A lot of good art in there, very interesting mechanic. It just didn't last, unfortunately. So Cloak is a Hero City Mystic Controller new warrior, and we know Dagger is a new warrior too, and so is Deadpool. God help us if we get the new warrior. So if you don't really know about the new warriors, they go back a long ways to my favorite, Ultra Boo. My first childhood crush was Firestar. I've always wanted her to really be in a game. She was a team-up in Marvel Heroes, but no Marvel game has actually brought her in as a playable character, sadly. Poor Angela. Also, Speedball, Nova, and a few others. Well, the new Warriors was what kicked off a wave of the internet eating its own and just kind of blowing up. The new Warriors is where we had the ones of the guy who was plugged into the internet in his brain, and Snowflake, and Safe Space, and Trailblazer, who had a backpack that was a pocket dimension. I cannot even begin to describe how bad of an idea. I mean, to be so over the top and actually call Snowflake and Safe Space that name and not give them like a similar name, to just actually outright and say it, just seemed like a April Fool's. I mean, it was... I just... You gotta think it was a massive troll in there. Oh, and also B Negative, which was like sort of son of Mobius to a certain degree. God help us if any of those show up in Strike Force. It is not gonna be pretty. But anyway. So, taking a look over here at Cloak, He has feet this time, unlike just kind of appearing as a cloak and a head and shoulders in Marvel Avengers Alliance. We have Into Darkness. Apply assist now to a dagger ally. Attacking the target and offense down. Pretty straightforward, probably very low priority in terms of bringing up to an orange tier. Umbral Embrace, which is moon, darkness kind of a thing. Attack the primary target for damage and apply slow and defense down. Gain an assist from dagger. Damage goes up. Clear 3 random positive effects. Apply offense down. And then finally, at the orange level, way more damage to the primary target. Apply slow, defense down, and offense down for 2 turns each. Plus, of course, you still have the clearing positive effects. This is a really good kind of soul-sucking ability, and it really does line up with what we saw here from Blackout. So it is kind of similar to Blackout, but since we don't have mental debuffs in this game, there is nothing psychic or mental. It just sticks within the comfortable defense down and offense down, because that's what Marvel Strike Force does. Even if something was to put you on fire, it's considered a bleed in this game, so don't really expect too much. Shadow Assault. Attack all enemies and apply 1 random negative effect from this list of blind, defense down, disrupted, offense down, and slow. If they are all equal, then that's pretty good to get a disrupted out of there. Also apply +1 vulnerable up to a maximum of 5 to all enemies. It's going to be interesting to see what the vulnerable is like. I think that means the ISO vulnerable. If dagger is an ally, additionally attack all enemies for piercing. Apply offense down up to a maximum of 5. So that kind of seems very pitch black-ish, but still with a mix of Blackout. It's a debuffer one. It looks like it's going to have some damage, but really this thing is all going to be about debuffs. And it will pierce. Appear at level 6, apply 3 random negative effects, and at the orange level, a little bit more damage. So I think taking up to 6 is going to be key. Take it up to 6 as quickly as possible. But I'm going to say if you need to orange something first, Umbral Embrace is winning. And then you have Dark Force Conduit. At the end of this character's turn, 50% chance to steal 5% health from the most injured enemy and all adjacent enemies, redistribute it to the self. If dagger is an ally, always steal 5% health from the most injured enemy and all adjacent enemies and redistribute to self and allies. Gain focus based on mystic heroes, which is pretty decent. We can take a look at what other mystic heroes will be out there. They really don't talk too much about new warriors until level 4. So other than pairing up with dagger, it seems like these two can kind of live on their own for the most part. Mystic heroes. There's new warrior, but it's for a raid. So yeah, these guys are kind of plug and play at the moment. They don't really have a big team to go with, but as you can see here, hero and mystic. So now let's take a look at dagger. Piercing light. Attack the primary target, apply a bleed, apply assist now to a cloak. Regeneration to the most injured ally or self, apply 2 bleeds, 2 regenerations, and 2 regenerations to 2. Pretty solid ability. If it goes off on assists, that's amazing. Peak. Attack the... So, by the way, in the show, she was represented as a ballerina. As a dancer. As a bit of a ballerina fanatic. Doesn't seem like we're going to get into that too much over here. Attack primary target for piercing. Clear a random positive. Chain to adjacent targets. Piercing crits, clears random positives. Clear heal block from all mystic heroes allies, and then it heals allies. So believe it or not, the healing was kind of spread out among Cloak and Dagger here back in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Here, Child of Darkness has it. It actually belonged to Cloak, but then Child of Light had a bit of like a protection, like pre-hit point loss, whereas Cloak was post-hit point loss over there. So that's a little interesting. Piercing, healing, clear 3 positive effects from the enemies, chain to 3, and then here at the orange tier, clear all positive effects on the primary target, chain to 4. Seems pretty orange-worthy there. That's good. Sisson Attitude. Don't know if I'm not pronouncing it right. Haven't seen this one before. Attacking all enemies for 120% piercing. Apply offense down. If Cloak is an ally, additionally attack all enemies for 80% damage, bringing that up to 200, which is good. Apply 1 random negative effect from blind, defense down, and there's the vulnerable. Piercing, additional damage, additional random negatives, and then here at the orange level, big pierce, another additional set of damage. Again, this one seems like it's really important to take to 6 quickly. I don't know what would be the first orange over here. My guess is honestly peak so far. Light Force Generation. Apply 2 regeneration to self and all Mystic Heroes. On turn, apply offense up to self and adjacent, so positioning is going to be key. If Cloak is an ally, always gain evade. On spawn, apply 2 regenerations for 2 turns to self and all Mystic Heroes. There's finally another new Warriors. And here on spawn, apply 2 regeneration for 2 turns to self and all Mystic Heroes and resistance. So I'm going to say, to me, I think the order would be Peak and Light Force Generation if you have a Mystic Hero team. If not, Peak clearly is the first. So if we take a look at Mystic Heroes, so we'll go with Mystic, and then we'll back it back up to Heroes. This breaks into a lot of existing teams already. You have a bunch of supernaturals that would work. You would get a lot of sustain if you brought Scarlet Witch into this team because of her redistribution of health. Deathpool is going to go with them. So I would say knee-jerk reaction, Deathpool, Cloak, Dagger, Scarlet Witch go well together, and then it's kind of up to you after that. Doctor Strange would fit thematically in that it would be a very debuff-oriented group and a debuff-spreading group through Scarlet Witch. So I think Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, Deathpool, and Cloak and Dagger would make a good 5-pack over there. That sounds really, really solid. Although that does kind of orphan Elsa and Ghost Rider and some of the other supernaturals over there. But you can have them do double duty. Black Panther really is stuck with Wakanda. Silver Surfer, kind of just plug and play anywhere. You don't want to mess with the Asgardians too much. Moon Knight belongs with Shadowland, which is relatively strong. And I don't have Adam Warlock unlocked right now. So that's pretty much how that goes. And I think that's a decent team. Before I saw all of the Mystic Hero ones, I kind of thought they might fit in pretty well, especially Deathpool, for a debuff-oriented team, bringing back one of the original teams that I made in the early days of Marvel Strike Force, which was like Scarlet Witch, Scientist Supreme, Venom, possibly, I think even I had Carnage in there. It basically was get some debuffs out to somebody and then spread them through Venom and Scarlet Witch. Sort of, it was a very MAA-oriented team. It was sort of Pesty Enchantress, Pesty Red Hulk team that I was going with at the time. Psylocke is good for that because Psylocke can take all the debuffs on her and dump it on somebody, and I actually think it's her whole team. Attack, chain, piercing damage. So she can clear positives. There it is. Transfer 2 negative effects from self and each ally to the primary target. So I think she's a really good combo with Scientist Supreme if you don't want to wait for the flip. So you can put out the debuffs with Retro, and then Field Trials flips it, but if you really have a kill target, you don't wait for that. You just have Psylocke do it, and you have her dump it all on somebody. So it could be interesting. Shang-Chi doesn't have a Marvel Avengers Alliance counterpart. But here he is. He's a Hero City skill brawler, and he goes with Heroes for Hire. Pressure Point Strike. Sort of Karnak-ish. Gaining extra crit chance if the primary target has any positives. He does straight damage and a slow. Deadly Hands, attack the primary target and adjacent targets for lower than normal damage. Clear a negative effect from self and allies, gain a counter. He's got War Defense. And eventually he gets to a point where he can clear all negative effects from self and Heroes for Hire. And then on 7, the orange tier, fill the speed bar, and on War Defense, fill the speed bar by a larger amount. So that seems pretty good. Seems relatively orange-worthy if you're doing them for wars. Attacks all enemies, applies speed up to all heroes for... Wow, that's really good. I like that immediately. Reduce the speed bar, and then down at the last 2 levels, higher damage, more damage per positive effect, and then reducing the speed bar at 7. That seems very orange-worthy. For War Defense, that's really good to kind of shut down the offense. And then Master Martial Artist, gaining a deflect, crit chance, block amount. On War Defense, if there's any Heroes for Hire, ally has a deflect, that character gains crit chance, block. And on War Defense again, on Spawn, if this character has 3 or more Heroes for Hire allies, if the health is full and not charged, gain 2 charged. Down here at the orange level with Deflect, you gain more crit chance, more block amount. So I would say the last 2 there would definitely be orange worthy. And let's actually take a look at who goes with Heroes for Hire now. There's the full kit. Iron Fist, Misty Knight, Luke Cage, Colleen Wing, and Shang-Chi. He helps replace Daredevil, who went over to Shadowland. Colleen Wing is really, really strong. I think he's going to be pretty good in this team up over here. As long as you keep Luke Cage healthy, and I think that's kind of what Shang-Chi's major job is going to do. It leaves really Colleen Wing to run the board with assistance from Misty Knight. And Iron Fist sort of backup heals over there. Interesting team. Unfortunately, we don't really have him in Marvel Avengers Alliance, but we do have him in Future Fight, and he is pretty F tier in this game. Now, there is currently a code. You can put in a code to Marvel Future Fight and get a bunch of his bios. The code is movie Shang-Chi, and I'll show you where you can put that in. It is buried under your settings. When you go to your account, it's over there where you can get into the coupon code. It's up in this screen over here. And I'll show you where he is in this. So we'll set this to combat. And we'll scroll really far down, and here he is. Very reminiscent of Lee from Tekken. Who, of course, yeah, I mean, this kind of speaks for itself with the tracksuit. And a bunch of these moves, and of course the nunchucks. I mean, very much seems to take from Bruce Lee. Shang-Chi is part of Elektra's card set in Marvel Duel. He is pretty good within that team up, which is very quest-oriented and completing quests. Here in Marvel Future Fight, he's really a nowhere character, but you can see I've already cashed in the code because I'm up to 710 bios. Just, yeah, absolute F tier. No power in this game whatsoever. And that's really the only other game he's ever been in, for the most part. So, We've taken a look at the new Warriors. We've taken a look at Heroes for Hire. So Cloak, Dagger, and Shang-Chi. Deathpool. We can touch on her really, really briefly to round out the video here. She's a lot of fun. Fatal Flourish, clear negative effects from the character, healing self, and attacking targets. If it's a minion, just like Deathpool, attack that enemy for more damage. She's kind of a Kestrel-ish, the way that she gets a lot of extra attacks. As combat goes on, she kind of reminds me of a dark Kestrel, really. Dance Macabre, reap what you sow, and death comes for all. On an enemy death, this is one of the big ones, heal itself and the most injured enemy, or attack the most injured enemy, clear 3 positive effects. When this character or any new warrior ally drops below 30% health, apply a death proof. So yeah, she's going to be pretty good with Cloak and Dagger, and then throw in 2 Mystic Heroes. Well, actually, she's going to count as a Mystic Hero, but throw in 2 other Mystic Heroes there, and I think it's going to be a pretty formidable team. I think Scarlet Witch would be good, and still Doctor Strange. It sounds slow, but sometimes slow and steady is what will actually win in a lot of these modes where you're not really dealing with a timer. So, there you guys go. There's a look at some of the new characters in Marvel Strike Force and comparing them to their iterations in other games. We don't really have the biggest comparison for Shang-Chi's we've seen. We have no comparison for Deathpool, but Cloak and Dagger we were at least able to bring back to Marvel Avengers Alliance, and it remains to be seen if they turn into a huge powerhouse in this game that they did for Marvel Avengers Alliance. They weren't really related to group bosses, you didn't use them there, but they certainly had PvE, wave clear ramifications, and they were gods and goddesses of PvP going down the last 6 months over there. So, thanks for checking out the video, everybody, and have a good one.